Oh, do you know what it was actually? I tried to message you through Instagram. I thought I'll follow you, try to message you through Instagram and reach out that way. And it said, you can't message this person unless they follow you back. And I'm like, shit, right? And then the next morning I wake up and you'd followed me back. So I was like, okay, cool. And I started to follow your approach to natural law, trying to understand where it fit in all of the other like law jurisdictions and like the whole sort of framework, which can be super complex. But the thing I appreciated about your approach was that it was principle based, and I don't necessarily understand the principles, which is what I want to sort of go through with you. But I got the sense that it was a really acute expression of life, in that you can find these principles not just in the statutory, the corporate jurisdiction, which is what we generally consider law, but throughout the whole scale, right, all the way up to creator, which is what a lot of these teachers talk about, pertain to, or connects you to God. I saw no evidence of that whatsoever in teachers that I had found. And one of the other things that sort of drew me to you was, because I had seen the Patelic interview and the Way Forward interview side by side, I noticed a real, and I mean this with utmost respect, but a huge shift in the way that you felt from the Patelic work, because I felt as though there was some anger, and it probably had to do with the time that we were in.
Yeah.
But there was a bubbling under the surface, and I went, oh God, there was a little bit. I was like, oh, almost like you don't want to touch the hot iron, But then seeing the Way Forward podcast and seeing that there was a very, very clear development from 2020 or 2021 to 2025. And I went, oh, that's really interesting. And so, as most people's introduction into some other alternative law or lawfulness in general is generally them watching a traffic stop on YouTube where the police officer and a civilian are arguing about rights and jurisdictions and not understanding each other, quite often leading to the civilian getting bashed or locked up, which is going to scare people off of the path or off of the line of inquiry that they feel actually may have some or hold some water. So I kind of want to massage that out, iron that out for these people, and get a sense of where that line of inquiry can lead in the most positive and released and detached way. Run us through where you started when it comes to this lawfulness and how it's led you to here, to this point of, in my opinion, just my subjective opinion, a pretty clear integration of what it is that you teach, which I find to be rare, which we've discussed before. Like a lot of people talk about a lot of things, but when it comes to integration, there's a mental component, there's a feeling astral component, and there's a physical component, living it out, expressing it. And these layers have to be synchronized in order for there to be the development that a lot of people speak of, like a connection to creator. So where did you kick off, and how did you do it?
Oh man. Okay, so first of all, can I just start with a little bit of a premise for it?
Yeah.
So when people talk about laws and natural law, and you started off by talking about how there's a lot of, maybe we will call them laws, like the statutory stuff that keeps people a little bit constricted, and it's becoming more and more prevalent in the world. It's becoming a little bit more restrictive, which is not, in my opinion, actually the case. I understand why it appears like that to a lot of people. But what I teach first and foremost, because before I was sharing a lot about natural law, I was a holistic health practitioner talking about health. And in my opinion, they work exactly the same. And when you see a lot of the corruption in law, like LAW law, like what we're bound by the state, it's because of a corruption in the people. It's not that people aren't good. It's not that people don't have good hearts. But what you mentioned before, if you don't have those bodies aligned properly, so you've got this like a harmonious resonance, it's just there's something that comes from a higher source working through and into the world. When there's a fracture there and distortion and things, it does look like dis-ease in the body, and it does look like, you know, a pretty dystopian looking society for people to live in. So what I try to do is help people come more back to themselves, because just like health, if you're just outsourcing and relying on medications and doctors, and it's the state's fault that they didn't tell you how many glasses of water to drink today and how many Nutri-Grain you should have for breakfast, that's why you're not well, then you know, it's the same thing. It's like, rather than look to, well, why is the government trying to do this? Or why is the state trying to do this? Why are police like this? It's like, if you can look to yourself first and realize where you might be breaking the law. And by breaking the law, I mean nature's laws. How are you not living in a resonance that is creator first, essentially? Like, what are you serving? Because you can't serve more than one master, essentially. And a lot of the times, because I know this because I've done it and I still do it, is you serve a master that is of a lower nature. And that might be like, I don't know, where your mind goes, or your actions or words or behaviors towards yourself or towards others or towards the world. And when you do that, you're going to experience a likeness in kind. So similarly, you know, I do speak a lot about natural law, but I actually don't speak about specific things that I have not yet come to an embodiment that I have that aligned resonance, like you said, because I could intellectualize it and it might sound like I know it, and it might sound like I can say it better than you've read in a book, but it doesn't mean that I really know it, because I don't, like, it's not aligned in those ways. That's why, you know, recently I've been making posts on social media about AI, meaning an artificial intelligence, because there's a lot of people that take, like, even my material, because I notice all people tell me, they're like, oh, did you know that they're doing this? That was on your course or something. I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's not mine. Like, it's not, you know what I mean? Like, whatever I am doing as a higher service, it's not mine in the first place. So whatever. But the only reason I bring it up, or I caution people around it, is that if you're getting it from a source that is purely intellectual, it's very rare you'll actually be able to take that into the world and do something with it that will actually change something in the what I call reality, this world around us, because it just it's missing too much. It sounds right, looks right, feels right, but it's not the right thing. So what led me to it was just being in my own dystopian world. Like, I was very angry. I grew up a little bit disconnected from things, and then you know, just seeing the world around me being unjust as far as I was concerned. But it was only when I just started to look at how I was unjust within myself that I actually started to experience changes, from not only my health improving, but then also with how I would interact with the police, who I thought were all the enemy, or the council, or the state, or the banks. And then everything just started getting progressively better from there. And yeah, I mean, it's obviously a work in progress, and I'm still as much of a student. Well, I'm still more of a student than I am a teacher in sharing it. But the only reason I got into it was a calling, as in sharing what I share. When people, I guess, can see that you don't react in the same way they react to something, and you just act in a certain way because it's coming from a different place, such as during 2020, like I didn't have the same reaction to it that a lot of people were having, because I'd already been through that and more prior to 2020. So I just had a clarity around what was happening and what wasn't. So it was just easy for me to act in a capacity that I knew was right, or at least the best that I could do. So then people were just like, can you teach us how or why? And then,
how are you okay right now?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Not only that, not just okay internally, but being able to be in the world in a way that wasn't affected by what other people were being affected by, which means, like, how do you speak to quote unquote authority? And what is authority? Where does it come from? Do you have an inner authority? Because if you don't, you'll succumb to an external authority. Like, it's really simple laws. And that's the kind of laws that is what I talk about when you talk about natural law, versus, you brought up, you know, the jurisdiction. So you've got your commerce or commercial law, then you've got tort law, common law, trust law, ecclesiastic law. There's many, but those all come under the banner of natural law, because the laws of nature actually find their way into these statutory laws. Just like when our law our internal law is off, we will experience disharmony in dealing with. I say if you don't have agency within, you'll deal with agents in commerce more than you need to.
I had an experience when I was maybe nearly 10 years ago. Went snowboarding, took my little brother, coming down the mountain, got pulled over by police. I didn't have my P plates on because I just got my full license. And out of here. Just got my full license, so I didn't think I needed to have them, but I needed to go and get the actual physical license to say you're no longer on your Ps, even though it just rolls over. On top of that, I forgot to pay my registration for like 2 weeks or whatever it was. So I had this hard cop come and go, I'm like 2.5 hours away from home, right? And he's going, sticks his head in the window, goes, well, you're going to have to get your car towed, you're going to have to do this, you're going to have to do that. And I remember being in that moment, and I'd just gone and studied with my teacher as well for like 2 weeks. So there was a bit of a continuity of the way I felt. And my brother goes, oh no, we're going to have to call Dad and this and that. And I just went, no, we're not. Watch this. And I literally put into the space around him, see me as your son. I don't see you as my enemy. See me as your son. Someone that you want to protect. Within a minute, he comes back. Hand on the frame. Listen. We're leaving in about 10 minutes. If you happen to take off once we're gone, I'm not going to put a call out for a gunmetal grey XR6. Right? I went, thanks, mate. And he goes, all right, see you later. You know? So to your point, if there's a disharmony and there's a separation that you're perceiving between you and this person, well, clearly there's a separation physically. But if you're also creating a mental and an energetic barrier between you two, you're not working as one or in some sort of harmony, you have these, I guess, what we'd call a situational dis-ease. Would that be along the right lines?
It's definitely along the lines. There's a lot of levels to that as well, though, because it's funny you said that that's how he acted, because I've done that too. I've had my own arm resting on the windowsill of police's cars and closed their door for them, and that as they're going off from, originally wanting to tell me off for something. But it's because of how you see things. Like I always say that when people are seeing like enemies outside of them, they're just not facing what's already inside of them, and the police aren't really the enemy. Now, there are a lot of cases out there that you can point to, and you would be correct if you said, but look, there's a lot of bad stuff out there too. There's police that just grab people and throw them on the ground. They assault people. There's police that do the wrong thing. There's police that run drugs. There's police that traffic children. There's all that. And yeah, that is out there. Like, I don't pretend that that's not there, but we can discuss how and why that happens to certain people and others not. But the end of the story is that there is no enemy outside of you other than what you have created from within and your own disempowerment. So as you overcome that, you don't see them as that anymore. They don't treat you as a subject to them anymore, because they're just on this, like, it's like a program that when they speak, people behave a certain way. Or if they come up to you, you behave a certain way. And outside of a very narrow parameter, they're not used to too much else. They're used to the ones that flip out and they know how to deal with that, but they're not used to the ones that stand in a resonance that is just won't shift. And they change as a result because it discombobulates what they're used to. And oftentimes they'll become extremely helpful, extremely anything that is outside of the norm of that construct. So it's super interesting. But when we're dealing with what we call them agents in commerce, like a police officer, it is important, in my opinion, to understand a few basic rules of commerce, because you don't want to do things like incriminate yourself or say too much stuff, which is your incrimination, becoming your own second witness. Lots of different principles that can really help. But the reason that I don't start there, and we haven't started there with our course running now, is because what you just described is the first step, because it's how you are. You can't rely on scripts and rules and laws, because you're trying to battle a law with laws you don't understand yet, and it doesn't really work. When people think that that's the thing that will help, but they haven't changed their own state, so
And it reminds me, and again, like, because your process is principle based, when I was looking at other principle based processes and recognizing that the more I dove into the principle itself, the more there was this top down understanding of, okay, I'll start here, like the first step, and then all the statutory stuff in this instance starts to make a hell of a lot more sense intuitively and takes you down pathways that aren't that's not integrated, but it's holistic in its approach, and therefore it isn't mentally destabilizing. Like I mentioned to you earlier, when I started diving into all the statutory law, recognizing what banks were doing and the way that loans work, and my wife had to say to me, can you just make this your hobby, not your full-time thing, because you're kind of losing it a little bit. And I was like, oh my God, I really am, because I wasn't coming at it from this place of I guess detached witnessing of what it is I was paying attention to. I was engaging, I was getting caught by it, and I was generating so much energy around it, and it completely, there was a very light type of fracture that took probably, a couple of weeks of not looking at it, a month not looking at it, for it to kind of close over and heal. Sorry, I detoured.
No, that's perfect. That's how it is. A lot of people, they come into things, they become aware of, they think natural law is law, like, oh, how do I get out of a fine, or how do I not pay tax, or how do I tell the bank to go shove it? And I'm like, but that's not what it is. Like, natural law, if you do want to use those specific examples as your way into it, then my first question is, how did you get into that? Like, why are you in this situation? And why do you believe that that's a problem? Because you're starting off on a paradigm that is, there is a problem, there is an enemy, you are disempowered, and you're asking how to get more empowered as a result. And there's some merit to that, because there are different pillars to being able to succeed in the world, and one of them is definitely knowledge. And one of the reasons that we get ourselves into trouble sometimes, or unwittingly fall into something that we didn't know we didn't have to, is we just didn't have the knowledge around it. We didn't know we didn't have to in the first place. We didn't know what to say. We didn't notice what to not say. For example, that's just basic stuff, which I understand why people want to start there, because they think that that's the answer. And it is a part of it, which is why it's still part of what I teach. But at the same time, that's such a small thing that if you are willing to forego a very, very short term, what you might consider to be a win, you can get to the stage where that stuff doesn't even exist for you anyway, and you can be doing far more important things with your life. So, like, people talk about taxes, for example, and so I always ask people, I say, well, how taxed do you feel currently? Because taxation, as in income taxation, is like, there's a lot of ins and outs around the validity of it, and if you should or shouldn't pay taxes and whatever, or how much or how little. But then when people don't or aren't willing to sit with the idea that they're taxing themselves, maybe how your wife was saying to you, how much of your energy was going into something that wasn't going to be fruitful for you, and what could you have been doing instead that would have been much more fruitful for you, your role in life, your family, and the flow and effect of that. So I always bring that up with people. And then once people are willing to actually look at things from an internal perspective, that's when we can much more effectively look at external processes, like how would you sign a piece of paper, or what would you say or not say, or what can you speak to a police officer? Because realistically, the way you handled your encounter with a police officer was based, like you said, on the time you just spent in a certain state of being because you were with your teacher. So you come out of that, you know what to say because it presents itself, because you're meeting life in the moment. So if you were actually, let's say, meant to have a worse experience, you probably would have, so you could have that experience. But you showed up in a way that gave you a standing relative to the offer, which was that you're going to have to get a tow 2.5 hours back to your house. So what happens is when you lower yourself from that standing, or you get so disempowered, you start refusing and trying to come out in an attacking way, you're generally not going to have the best experience doing that. But if you can meet the moment and meet the experience, generally the solution presents itself, or you all of a sudden, for some reason, know what to say. But it's not what you would learn in a law book about say this to police or don't say this to police. It's totally different. So whatever you say is the right thing to say, because it's coming from the right place into the interaction. So when people are in a state of fight, flight, and fear response, or they're super angry, or they've just been hit with something that they perceive to be an affront to their quote unquote freedom in the world, you can understand why people react the way they do. Mm-hmm. But natural law is about a lot more than that. And that's why when people are trying to learn too much about processes, or we're all in this boat of we're all this one humanity and like screw the system and that's all this evil empire and whatever, it's like, you can, but I can show you from about 20 years of my own experience what kind of results you'll get from that. And they're just not very favorable. So, and anything that is a quote unquote result will be fleeting and short term before you met with something that you just kind of crushes people. I've just seen it so many times over the last 20 years.
A friend of mine, when I first started looking, or that time that my wife was like, can you just make it your hobby? I was speaking to a friend of mine who lives in Canada, and he lives in a van, and I met him training. He just practices all day, every day, and teaches retreats when he starts to run out of money type thing. And he was like, oh, that's really interesting. And he's diving into it, and he's going, okay, ask me questions, this, that, and the other. And he goes, and then about a week later, he hadn't hit me up too much. And I said to him, have you fallen off the wagon with that stuff? Like, I can feel that you've let go of it. Why have you let go of it? And he said, without even watching anything, just listening to me, he goes, because what sort of quality of life do these people who are teaching this have? And I went, the dude I was listening to at the time, I was like, oh, actually, that's a very, very good point. Super unhealthy, super neurotic. You could see the way he consumes things on the streams, and you go, there is such unbelievable imbalance mentally, emotionally. There's all this past stuff that you can feel. And then his body, I don't know much about the nervous system, but if I had to guess, there was a nervous system overload and meltdown and something highly dysregulated with this guy. And I went, oh, okay, I understand. And to backtrack a little bit too, to another point, when I was in that state of mentally breaking it all apart, and you said, what could you have been doing at that time that could have benefited you and your partner and your family and your life? There's an interesting balancing act there, because that I felt to be a very key lesson and a foundation for where I ended up a year later when I went to explore it more. I knew how to approach it, but I also had this whole backing of knowledge that had then sunk into the deeper layers of my awareness to the point where it wasn't staticky and sharp and painful to look at. So it felt to be highly necessary, though lacking balance. What do you? Because you've mentioned before the, what did you say? You said that wherever you're at, and don't feel as though you need to be somewhere else. So where does that factor in with regard to optimization and allowing yourself to completely go off balance?
All right, so we can talk about specific situations if you want as we chat, but just to give an overview of it, yeah, I agree with what you're saying, because I have to backtrack a bit. In my opinion, we're all super different. Not only are we really different as human beings, as in we're not all really the same in many different ways, but we all have a different soul path. And for some people, really diving into the depths of different rabbit holes is a big part of their progression for their own soul. And what comes out of the other side is like, that's their path towards that. But for so many people, it's a big distraction from their soul path. And that's where you said the key word, which is balance. That constant asking of yourself, or that feeling into like, is this really like, how am I acting or behaving, or what is my life like as a result of this? Now, there's another side of that, which is the path of discipline and sacrifice and what have you, because you know that it's the right thing to do. Sometimes people don't want to get up at 4 a.m. and run and do push-ups and prepare healthy meals and whatever before they spend time with their family, before they work. But if that's to get them toward their end life goal with their family, and it's the right thing to do, then what doesn't feel good in the moment is the right thing to do. That's discipline and sacrifice, and there's value in that. But if that's got nothing to do, that's just a neurotic thing where it's like, I'm just going to be like this dude, I'm tough if I do this, or I'm like whatever. It's not got to do with your soul path. It's not got to do with a higher purpose. You're not serving a higher good. Because of that, you've got a neurotic loop that's running, and it's a program, and that's not going to lead to something fruitful. Having said that, I always say, like, always our way. Like, you could wake up to yourself doing that. So I'm not going to tell people, I never tell people don't do it.
Yeah.
What happens is when people come to me and they're like, hey, what about the whole mortgage thing? Like, how is that a scam? Or what about this? Is that a scam? Or what about this? Can you do this in a courtroom or with a policeman and with that? And I'm like, you can. But then I'm like, where are you at with your life? And what path are you on? Because I can tell you I'm willing to have the conversation and we can look at it. And if that's something that seems like it's going to be really beneficial because the experience will help others or yourself or whatever, then I'll help them have that experience. But if we have a talk about it and realize that was actually just they were being drawn into a trap, like I call them soul traps. You could look at it as like an energy trap or like a distraction from life, which show up all the time to test us to see if we're really on track, which part of the ego is jumping into it, as opposed to which part of ourself is really on a path that's going to lead to something fruitful. A lot of the times people realize that it's not something they really need to know about, but to the degree to which you're willing to look at that is also representative of something which I think is super valuable, which is your ability to integrate darkness, because some of it's actually quite dark. To be able to fathom how and why there is a control structure in place or a control matrix in place, but the fact that you can handle that in an infinite number of ways, because under the laws everything's an offer. So the agreements you form are based on where you're at. And there's a maxim actually that says ignorance is no excuse of the law. So if you don't know that, you don't have to say something to incriminate yourself. The ignorance is no excuse of you putting your foot wrong and having a fine or ending up in a cell for a month or whatever. According to the natural laws which govern these maxims of law, it's like, well, you kind of agreed to it on some level. Mm-hmm. So your ability to look beyond, that's unfair, that's unjust, those people are enemies, they should not be there. The ability to go, well, what was I doing that led myself into that in the first place, means you're already free. Even if you spent that month in a cell or paid that $300 fine or whatever, you're more free than the guy that spends 5 years of his life trying to figure out how that connects to this trust, which connects to that Vatican, which connects to this thing over here, and this guy who's the prime minister of that, but he's really the king over here of whatever. Like that, in my opinion, doesn't lead to anything fruitful, because that doesn't really end. And I've seen people in that space for 20 or 30 years, like you described, that are just gnarled people that just think the world's a hellhole and it's this trap and they're not getting out. So they build a big audience teaching people how they'll never get out of this soul trap, this hellhole or whatever. And I'm like, even if that was true, what good does that, without a way to deal with that or a solution that is embedded within that, which is another part of law, if I was to provide you with let's say a liability, I must also provide with that a remedy. For example, if you're somebody that has no sustenance, you're on welfare or you're something, and I try to hit you with a $30,000 fine for something, there is no way that you can pay that. So there must be a provision for you to be able to meet that in a way that does not take away your livelihood.
And that's written into law, is it?
Yep.
So there's always an opportunity, even on paper,
There is, you just don't have to be told about it, which is why it leads into ignorance is no excuse of the law. But if you're willing to it all comes from a knowing. So if you know that you're here on earth not to be pushed around and to be able to create in the image of the creator or whatever you want to call that, well, then you'll find a way to support that. You'll be like, no, but that just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. You can strip me of my livelihood, my dignity, my whatever. So maybe there's something I'm not doing. Like if I'm getting bullied every day, what is it that I'm putting out? How and why am I allowing that to happen? What boundaries am I not putting out? Am I not in good physical shape? Am I not able to defend myself physically or with my words? Should I actually learn how to do that? And then ergo the bullies go away. Or you're not in a position, you're not in a bully energy, right?
Interestingly enough, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So many of the things that you're saying, all of these moments in my own history, I'm noticing when I was either in ideas about what I think to be true versus being there and finding the solution, even if it's not hyper consciously. But when I was first started high school, when I was 10, well, rather I'll backtrack a little bit. When I was 10, I snapped my leg. For a year, I ate whatever I wanted without moving. Ended up putting on like 15, 20 kilo or something. So I limped into high school, 20 kilos overweight, quite short still. And the bullying started, right? There was this thing, like they just saw this thing, and I was a nice kid, this and that. And I didn't get mean, but something shifted. I don't remember the moment it was, but it shifted to the point where nobody bullied me anymore, and even led to 10 years beyond that, people would say to me, if we had particular situations or whatever, and they go, oh yeah, but you know how to fight, or Harley could mince us or whatever. No evidence of that whatsoever. But I remember there being this, and again, I don't remember the moment, but I remember there was something that came in that was this sharper, internal, little bit of C-bomb about me that didn't express itself, but it sat there and looked at people. Not in a negative way, but it was something that shifted energetically, and that completely disappeared from my life. Even fast forwarding into the time when I was in Home and Away and all that stuff was going down, people thought I was the devil in there. If I was weak, if I didn't have that, because I could feel it there, like looking at people, nobody ever attempted to come and have a conversation or try to tell me what's what, ever. In fact, they avoided me. I actually went after them. I said, what's the matter? And they go, oh, nothing. I said, no, let's talk. Let's sit down. Right? So to your point, sorry, I just wanted to lay in a real life explanation to maybe give some context.
Yeah, for sure. But why was the, have you sat with why that was there in the first place? Is it an inherently, because, okay, the reason I asked that is that, let's say you rewind to 2020 or whatever, you're outside of your house, you're not meant to be outside of your house or whatever. The construct is that you're in a hostile environment. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that, because I and a lot of other people that I could share stories of had positive experiences during that time, whereas other people had horrendous experiences in that time. So there's what I'm saying is that there's a general agreed construct, which is where a lot of this natural law stuff comes from, that is, we're in this kind of world. And then people make the mistake of thinking that this is the world. So, because I worked in film, I've done gaffer work, lighting work, film, camera, whatever, and I know that in different environments, there's a lot of cliques. There's a lot of you're seen a certain way, people are treated a certain way. There's an accepted norm. There's just hierarchies and structures within that environment. So I guess what I'm asking is, did you bring something into it, or is there an existing like egregore there that you had to just not allow to affect you?
I think it was both. I think what do you mean by, I can feel what you mean by egregore, but I don't know specifically what it means.
Well, so an egregore is like an entity that's created around an idea or a thought form or a construct of how things already are or how things will play out.
Well, there's definitely a type of governing intelligence that is within that place that's built by and maintained. It is accepted. Oh, interesting. Offered and accepted by the people who walk in there, because it is the path of least resistance to basically bend the knee. But it does make sure that everybody operates on, not everybody, but as a general rule, the default would be a very specific way of interacting with each other, which, I guess if I didn't know that's what it was called, but there was a governing intelligence. I noticed when I went in there for the first time, I felt a lot of resistance to the place to begin with. And so I knew how to navigate it because I'd been around these sorts of industries, or this industry, for my whole life. So I kind of knew how to move around these things. But then when the egregore started turned and started to look at me in that kind of way, I think that old aspect of myself came in to fight what it thought was a battle. What it thought was, try it. Not that I would ever put that on people, but there is an undercurrent of that.
Mm-hmm.
You do not get to overstep the mark with me, or there's trouble, type of thing. It sounds real like teen angsty, which I guess really what it is. But that's still there.
But that's that's like a law, because that's like, if you agree to drive on the road but you do over 60, you're going to get a fine. That's like a boundary or a law that's kind of written in. It's the same thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just that if people do try to take, because in that industry or in that environment under that egregore, it's generally agreed that people, you work longer than you might want, you do favors that you might not want to do, you're treated to have a standing that's implied and then accepted, agreed upon, and acted in the capacity of. But you're just you're in that position where you're saying, well, I accept the structure because that's how things work well, especially on a film set. It doesn't work well if everyone's the cook,
Yeah.
You got to have your roles, and you got to be humble enough to have that role. If somebody says pick that up, you don't have to wait for a please, you pick it up because it gets the job done, and everybody succeeds at the end of the day. But then beyond that, look, you can't demean me as a person. You can't expect I do more of that, because people in this position accept that because they get a paycheck. Because if they're like, if I grovel hard enough, I'll get somewhere eventually. So that, I don't see that as a bad thing. The fact that you've got a part in you that will set a boundary that says no, because that again is a big part of natural law. Like refusal is belligerence. That's a no standing. That's having really nothing to say. So you just bark back, or overreact to something that didn't need to be reacted to in the first place, versus just no. That's got standing. That's got power behind it.
So that doesn't fall under the same category as a refusal.
No, they're two totally different things.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can you dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So
even though you just did.
Yeah, I'll expand on it for you, because when we're dealing with, I guess I'll start with commerce first. So this is where people are dealing in the world of police, courts, council, because everything's commercial. And this is where people generally find themselves interested in quote unquote natural laws, because they realize that we're in this commercial structure. And so now it's all about, how do we figure out commerce, and how do we figure out trust, and how do we figure out the name and the all caps, and this is, and I just say to people, don't really worry about that, because you're just going to end up figuring out a lot of stuff that's inherently true, but you don't know what to do with it. So what's the point? You'll end up being more disempowered and probably get yourself in trouble. And the analogy, which I'll continue with, but the analogy is when people just go, you know what, there's probably a lot of pedos out there, so I'm going to take up boxing, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, and Krav Maga. And then within a month of training, they're in a fight, and they've never been in a fight in their whole life. Why? Because it's that innate need for a human being. Like once you open yourself up to something, you're kind of like looking for it everywhere, and you find trouble where it was never going to look for you.
There's plenty of offers for trouble out there.
Plenty of offers for trouble like that. So with this world of commerce, we never want to just outright refuse. So let's just look at a situation a lot of people were in, which is maybe your job was on the line, right? And it's like, listen, you need to do this, this, and this, otherwise, see you later. So rather than refusing and you can't do that, or I'm never going to do this, it's not right, it's like none of that matters, because none of that's part of that initial offer. We're not really discerning what is and is not on the table, and all we have to do is actually just handle it in a way that is not refusing it, accepts the fact that there's an offer there, but handles it in a way that overcomes that, comes from a higher standing, gives a counter offer that makes people think they shouldn't have given it to you in the first place, things of that nature. So if we just say no, that is allowed to be expanded on in a way that you already have a standing that can back up the no. When people just outright refuse, there's nothing to back up the refusal. It's the dog with the really loud bark that won't shut up. That's the equivalent of a refusal. It's got nothing. It can't do anything, so it just barks and barks and barks. Whereas there's a dog that might just give a "Urgh," and then it doesn't do anything else. And if I push that dog, that growl, that no means I'd better not actually, because it's got a standing. It can back that up. I don't know. Does that analogy work?
Yeah.
So the way we talk about that insofar as the world of commerce, we just go, look, just generally speaking, don't refuse. If you feel yourself refusing and being drawn into a battle that's not really there, you're in this energy of refusal, and it's seen as dishonorable. The reason it's seen as dishonorable is because it's somewhat belligerent. It's usually going to be followed by a raising of the voice, a swear word, a name call, just an emotional reaction. And when we're dealing with laws, which are essentially just on paper, we're just dealing with facts. It's like ones and zeros, yeses and nos. And if you enter into it with that kind of belligerence, you are seen as somebody who doesn't have this is how far this unravels. You're seen as somebody who babbles, who doesn't have a standing, who is putting themselves as a chattel or a ward of the state, who just, you're begging to be governed because you're kind of showing you don't have the ability to stand on your own 2 feet. You don't have a standing, you can't govern yourself, you don't have an inner authority, so you will accept the authority. And the first word in authority is author, who's writing the story, who's telling the story, just accepting the narrative, like, yeah, you'll do what I say. So then if though we have a standing, we know who we are, we have a comprehension of what's going on, you're an agent of the state has an ABN, your outfit, whether police, council, whatever, has an ABN, or if you're in America or another country, you'll have some kind of company number, some kind of structure like that. So you know what's what, you know what you do and don't have to do, and in that situation you just say no. And that's the end of the story. The story meaning the authoring. So now we've leveled out any authority mismatch. So it's not the end of it all. That could go a number of different ways, but when you at least start there and you know why, you can handle it really, really easily. So if it starts to go into a realm where you're being asked more questions or you're being given threats, you know how to handle that. You don't have to be so reactive, you just act from that point, which can be 100 different things. If you have the ability to just say no, it's like your experience with the guy after your snowboarding, where you just had a resonance about you that you basically did say no, but without going into a heavy refusal. Did you even verbalize it? I think you just verbalized it to your brother, right?
I didn't verbalize it.
You didn't even, but you didn't have to because your energy already had a bit of a stand. You just knew you were just, we're not doing that. Yeah. But you didn't have to go like slam, like we're not doing that. Like, screw these people. Yeah. You didn't have to do that. That would be the refusal. Yours was just, we're not doing that.
Well, the thing that pops up for me is when people don't know who they are, which we can get into soon, it's like who we are. They're generally in the realm of ideas and the shape of me and all based on their past that dictates to them like, oh, I do this, I am this, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And the converse to that in sitting in yourself is recognizing all those patterns in the beginning to allow them to rise and fall and just to witness them all. And the reason I bring this up is because when I'm reflecting on the times when I am not belligerent, it's when I am sitting in that observer's seat and what's coming to me, the energy that's coming to me in the form of the offer, well, you're going to have to get a tow truck, this and that. There's a yielding to what's coming to me and then acting from that spot as opposed to you try and punch me, I try and punch your fist. There feels to be something in that. Does that make sense?
Yep, in the middle for sure, yeah.
Where it's not accepting that energy in. It's I'll let you do what you're going to do because I don't actually need to stop you doing what you're doing.
Yes, but there are situations where you. So the commercial aspect is what we just discussed. The natural law aspect is what you have boundaries and a no for. A lot of it's got to start with yourself. Like what are you not willing to accept as a lower energy within yourself anymore? Things, programs, habits, anything that you like, limiting beliefs, everything that would hold you back from living what you know and everybody knows on some kind of level. Like that's where a lot of depression and anxiety and other things come from, is we just know we're not who we are meant to be.
You think that's it? Like, I mean, it's obviously not. Do you think people really all know that there's an inner knowing of that being the case, or is it just like people are going, oh, I'm super depressed, this sucks, life is shit?
Yeah, well, it's both. There is a knowing on a certain level. Whether somebody is cognizant of that level or not is another story.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
the more somebody's willing to actually have a look inward, the more they're likely to find that. But a lot of people just aren't, though. And I also, at this stage in my life, and this may change in the future, I don't believe some people are in the progression of life that they're here to have in this lifetime. I don't think they're even meant to find that, because I don't know exactly how to explain that in great detail, but just from what I've experienced in life, there are some people I just don't think are going to find that. Yeah, it's a different soul progression. That's a very lengthy discussion, I think. But just for anybody who's going to listen to a Frequent podcast, they're going to be somebody who can find that.
Yeah.
So anybody gets through the first 5 minutes of a podcast like this, they can find that.
Yeah.
So as far as the laws of life and law LAW, this is funny, because when I speak to Americans like Alec or whatever, they're like, it sounds weird to us that you're trying to distinguish law LORE from law LAW, because to them it's like law or law. It's two different ways. Like, you say the words differently, but we say it the same.
Yeah.
So LORE, law, is the story, and this is how things essentially. It's why the indigenous call it the dream time or the dreaming. It's how the story, the law, finds its way into the world, and it makes its way into the world through the construct in the middle, which is laws, physical laws, cause and effect. Like, I bang my head on this, it's going to hurt.
Yep.
Or stay up too late and don't get enough sleep, not going to function as well the next day. So those are the physical laws, but those marry, or those are underwritten by, you could call the natural laws, LOREs, the stories, that then meet the cause and effect laws, and then that's how we get our reality that plays out in this life.
In all these variables that come from the cause and effects,
Yep. So within that, the first thing is, before we even have a waking moment in the world that we call reality, there is the law going on between us and what's behind us, our energetic bodies, our soul, our ancestry, our creator. And how that plays out determines how this in front of us plays out. And that also includes interactions with the state, or how we view the state, or anything like that, or fines, or anything that people are interested in. So there is a big component of refusal versus no from that energetic place first.
In terms of what you naturally feel to be an option.
Yeah, in terms of how we accept the place that we're in. And what's really hard for people, because I had 20 years of chronic fatigue, it was really hard for me to accept it in the first 10 years of it, because I was an athlete, I was supposed to be doing really well, I was a high achiever and a high performer. And then I spent 10 years as a victim, because I'm like, it's not fair, it's not fair. And, everyone has their things growing up, but then, I was also friends with people who physically would tremor most of the day because of what happened to them as a kid. And it's the sort of stuff that if you wrote it on paper, you'd probably even barely write the words out. It's that bad,
Yeah.
So then you're like, well, how can you accept that? How can that be fair or just, or in any way, how does that work? And so the degree to which we still have refusal for that law is the degree to which we'll still have an inconsistency in our life in the world that we live. Because it's just, you can have a no, which will set a boundary for the taking of you for the rest of your life. But while you still have a refusal for the initial story, the soul is still bound by something that is very strong, that is just, it's almost like kept in a standing that's not able to stand on its own 2 feet yet, and it can't move past that. And the people that I've seen who have actually accepted the story, not that it's great, but just at least accepted, they don't have a refusal to it anymore, like a belligerence with it, and they're able to get on with it. They're just, worlds have opened up to them, and they're actually super grateful for, or at least they have some kind of inner standing as to why. It's something much higher than their mind or their ego could ever conceive, but they've reached a place that's just, that somebody with my expression and my experience in the world could not attain that level of oneness, because I haven't had to be opened up enough, to put it in a contextual way. What were you going to say? You wanted to interject.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I like that. I like conversing more than just...
Yeah. What resists persists.
Mm-hmm.
Is it, that kind of, any spiritually minded Instagram girl could tell you that.
Yeah.
what resist persists, and
Yeah.
and there was another aspect to that as well. I was going to ask you whether you meant when you were saying law, resisting the law, whether you were talking about the story,
The
or
story, yeah, the story.
LAW law.
The story, just because a lot of people, I mean, you've obviously done a lot of your own work. You can, even just sitting with you, I can tell you've done a lot of inner work from your own journeys and things, and you have a teacher that's obviously helped you a lot in your life. I never had teachers. From what I learned early in my life, because I was very academic, I was very mind oriented before I realized that was the cause of a lot of my illnesses and things. But no matter where I looked, I never studied anything to great detail, because I always felt that it would limit me and what I could perceive beyond that. So if I studied Rudolf Steiner and only Rudolf Steiner, it would kind of limit me to a man and his construct. As great and right as it might be, it's still a construct. One man cannot know all that. And same with anybody else that I started to learn from or learn about. And there was not one thing that I came across that didn't suggest that the soul already chose its beginnings in a way that just, it's something it needs to experience to be able to become the essence of what it really is to become. Whether that's, coming into a bong smoking family, or getting heavily abused, or coming into a trust fund family, or just like quote unquote normal, where you just have to kind of figure things out as you go. It all makes sense at that soul level before you come into this construct, coming through all of the levels of energetic density before it makes its way into here. So when I started to look at things from framing the world as, even if I'm wrong about this, if I see myself as not a victim, then clearly my life here is going to be better. And there's a difference between that and then just putting the wool over your eyes and just getting all hyper spiritual and bypassing everything. There's a big difference between taking responsibility and taking some of your creation into your own hands and just letting go completely and being too much of an open vessel to anyone and everything, which leads to a lot of destructive tendencies. And a third part of that is just, thinking that you're the God force and you're the creator, therefore you don't even have to have a reverence for anything higher than you because you're God, and therefore there's a lot of different ways people find themselves falling into, at least from what I've experienced. But I know that when I saw myself, I just refused to see myself as a victim. My health got better. I still had a deeper reverence for something higher than me. I got more of a humility, and everything in life got better, while maintaining or gradually getting more and more of a reverence for life itself, or that which I don't know. And so that worked well for me. So can I say that is inherently a law, LAW? I can't, because I'm not the one that writes the law, the LORE law. But what I can do is share with people that from my experience in dealing with a lot of other people, I have yet to disprove that as a law. So I can't say that it is, but I can say I haven't disproved it. And there's been a lot of things that I took on as a belief, and when I actively tried to disprove, I could disprove it relatively quickly.
Yeah, I mean, being an actor, I was pursuing acting for let's say 16 years. But I remember for the first 10, I was doing what I was incentivized essentially to do something that most of us do not want to do at all. And it's looking at the content of our mind, the way that we feel, and what we actually do, and the way we create those patterns. And what I mean by incentivized was, if the more I knew about myself, the more tuning forks I was able to identify within my system, the more empathy I could have for the people around me. And I could pick up on what they were going through, because I had identified with like surgical type precision with some of them, why I felt that way at that time. And generally, there's different information and different law, LORE law, but it's the same sort of framework for everybody. And the other thing that I found was, it was actually kind of very fortunate for life, but unfortunate for my craft, was that when I would identify it, it was a lot harder to use, because it just didn't, all the energy was sucked out of it. And that looking at those patterns, if you were to break it down to just its base elements, was being as objective as I possibly could be with what I was seeing. And as I would do that, there'd be a separation that would take place, and then an inner understanding of, oh, that's not me. That's not me. And as soon as I recognize that, all the energy falls out, it falls away. And you end up in this place of just witnessing what's there, and not allowing the law of your past to basically grab the reins and start driving you around autonomously, or, tell you what to do. And because those variables were no longer influencing where I was going, there's many variables, by the way, that still very much influence where I'm at now. You mentioned before, with sort of you're the eternal student. That was a major turning point. And the thing that, because I have been on the other side predominantly, not recognizing like what's actually causing it, quite often, the thing that pops up when you're talking about these people who go, yeah, but this and this and this and this, and you haven't been incentivized to look deeply at yourself, so you haven't done it yet. And that there's a reason why it's like step one in these spiritual processes is know thyself and continue to know thyself. Does that make sense in terms of factoring into the law?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because some of the things you're talking about, I have no idea what your audience is. So I had this discussion with Alec. I said to him before the one that you watched, I said, we had a break halfway through, and I said, do you want me to shorten some of the answers? Because I don't know what your audience is. He said, no, everybody who listens to this podcast is already familiar with a lot. You don't need to go over base stuff. But I have a feeling that you're going to attract a lot. You're going to attract people that are on your wavelength to a degree, or at least, within the scope of being able to reach that at some point. So in my opinion, you're talking about some fairly, at least intermediate level, meditative or just ability to be present in life and actually look at yourself in many different ways. Because I know a lot of people out there from running workshops and seminars and things over the last 5 years are not able to really take on board some of the things you're talking about. That ability to witness yourself, the ability to be present with the moment and things like that, which to me is just kind of like base level and going to intermediate level, just mindfulness and meditation, which to me is just so key for everything. But when you label it as that instead of something that's a little bit more exciting, people already have a construct of the mind of what that is. And that's where people just, you don't have a bank account anymore. You just go join an ashram, you sit in the lotus position for 10 hours a day. But you can do that mowing the lawn or being in a very busy job. You can still be mindful, meditative, be witnessing yourself, your thoughts, be a witness of the interaction, the energetics. But then other people just don't even know what you're talking about. So what I like to do is give people a starting point where if this has something to do with my parking fine, what is it? Because I'm just hearing you talk about yogi stuff.
Yeah.
Which is, to me, it's the basis of everything. But some people, you got to meet people where they're at.
Sure.
Who knows where people are at that are listening to this podcast, but where people, in my opinion or my experience, aren't connecting those two dots because they are exactly the same thing. But people don't see them as the same yet. What I would say is if you choose a framework to start from, you can start to figure out a lot for yourself and not be like what you just described. So for example, the TV now tells you that everyone's going to die because of like carbon dioxide or something, right? And you're just like...
Rest in peace, world.
Yeah. So you just go, I don't think I have to stay in my house or only go into town for 15 minutes. I'm pretty sure that that's wrong. So instead of trying to fight it and refuse it and just see everything outside of yourself as the problem, just go inside, just stop for a moment and just go, okay, if I know myself to the degree that I know that that is not true and that I don't have to do that humans are pretty amazing if they allow it to happen at powers of deduction and your cognitive bias, or at least your ability to, like confirmation bias and whatever, a lot of the time that works against us, but we can make it work for us. So if we start from the framework of, okay, I know that that's not true and I know I don't have to. you will inherently, your energy will go into a place that will help you to find the answer much faster and more efficiently than I've got to post this on Facebook and screw this and do that. We've got to form a rally to stop that. It's like, you could do that, but it's not going to lead you to the answer. It's going to lead you to feeling like something's being done, feeling like you're quelling an enemy, but you're not really looking at where it's coming from and why you're in this position in the first place. So if you at least start with everything's an offer, that can't be true in the first place. This whole thing that is being presented to me, so that's an offer, and I know I don't have to. And you will just, if you calmly go about your business, you'll find an answer. It'll either come, you'll hear the right thing that day. You'll just inherently just somehow know what to say or do or whatever. It will just happen because you are now working with a positive law, not a negative law. Ooh. And it's like the basis of natural law is you got your positive and negative to have this world of duality. Mm-hmm. You can talk all you want about the whole whatever beyond that, but it doesn't really matter. Like I always tell people, like, imagine a Taoist master. He ends up in a situation where he's not supposed to be outside of his 15-minute zone or whatever. He's not wearing a mask. He doesn't have a light. And the cop's like, all right, mate, what are you doing? And he's like, you just quotes a passage from the Tao. It's not going to get you very far. You see a lot of this. Like, you see people talk about universal laws and nature's laws and laws this and laws that, but it's like they've never been in a courtroom. They wouldn't know what to say to a police officer. They wouldn't know what to say to a woman who's yelling at them with these laws. They don't meet the world in a way that actually means something tangible because they haven't had the lived experience. It's all this, the intellect. It's just, I've come across a law, so this is a law and I'll teach it. I'll run a course on it or something. But if you can't put yourself in various worldly situations and affect those laws, they're not really laws. They're just figments of the imagination, which is why to get to know the structure of where the LAW laws come from, I don't believe is super fruitful, unless, which I can never comment on for another person. I just know it's not for me, unless it's just going to help your soul progression for whatever reason that's going to turn into. Like you said, if you leap in the net, you don't know what's going to happen by embarking on a journey. You just have it as a knowing. And if it's a knowing, it's like, you know what, like, it's not out of angst and all this other stuff. It's just, I've just got this knowing just calling me to find out. I just got to find out. And just go for it, just go for it. That's going to lead to something.
Do you find that knowing that you don't have to accept an offer in whatever instance? Because it's kind of, the question that pops up for me is like, okay, but if you don't know, you don't know. Mm-hmm. And, I had an instance maybe 10 or so years ago, and I think it was the seed of exploring this terrain. And that was suddenly contemplating how it was possible for this person, just because they're wearing a uniform, for them to decide that they were going to place me and my body in a room for an undisclosed period of time. And that's perfectly okay. Suddenly there was this like shattering of a view, of a worldview that went, how on earth is that a thing? It doesn't make any sense. However, even as I'm saying it, I can feel myself teetering between the person that I was before that recognition and the one that was after that recognition. And it's really hard to create that bridge. Well, no, that's actually a question. How would you create that bridge intentionally without it spontaneously arising?
Wow, that's a great question, actually, because I do think that life gives us these moments and opportunities because we're ready for it. It's like the tap. You've ever heard the expression that life whispers, and if you're not listening, then it yells?
Yeah.
So you'll be given opportunities to heed that call without it being something overt. And if you're not really listening, it'll end up with you being in a cell and somebody's got a baton, and then you're like, okay, now now I realize this is the call. Now I realize there's something more to question. So in that though, look, if somebody's never come across any of this and now they're just hearing about it for the first time, this is probably the subtle offering to, do you want to actually figure out who you are in this world? Because these are realities, these are the laws of the jungle. Like if you want to go over there and there's a silverback, you got to know who you are and who they are and how to operate before you can transcend that experience where you don't have to deal with that anymore. So where people, I think, could get a really good grounding in things is just to know that there are two different worlds that we're not told about as we come into the world, unless for some reason you were fortuitously given the education in this, but there's a public world and a private world.
They're called Rothschild children.
They are, yeah. They don't use iPads. They don't do other stuff. They don't get vaccinations. They use homeopaths. They do all this other stuff.
Astrology.
Yeah, all the woo-woo stuff. So in the world of the public, that's not living. It's the world of entities. It's the world of drivers and taxpayers and trustees and all that. And those are all on paper. They're not living men and women, right? So then we have the world of the private, which is the world of the living. And the move that's been played, which some people say it was 1666 with the Cess-Culovy Trust and all the other, is well before that. It's from like the beginning, which is man falling into this illusion that he is like an identity. So it's the identity illusion, in my opinion, that's where it started. And then that wound its way into growing that illusion into then creating entities out of people. So you now your name and you've got this birth certificate and a trust and everything else. So you can follow that all you like, but to me, it doesn't get to the core of where all this comes from, which is from us.
Which is why, exactly the reason why I wanted to have this conversation, because you have to look at it from the top down in order for it to make sense. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Because otherwise, you've so in health, I don't think I came up with the term. I think it's a scientific term, but it's called reductionism. Reductionism is if you take an orange and you go, well, oranges are good for whatever, and I think it's got vitamin C in it. So if I take this part out of the whole, then I can explain everything with this part. So like reducing something down to a bit part, but the whole is far more than the sum of its parts. You take each part out and try to study it individually. It's never, even if you add those together and times them by 5, it's still not the sum of that whole with all of those together. So when we're just trying to go, okay, birth certificate here, and we think that we can use that to solve a problem or explain something, you just can't, because you're using reductionism, and it's just this mind trap. So when we're dealing with this at a base level, just at least knowing that there's private and public, you don't want to stop there, because then there's that within us too. So we have the parts that's real and the parts that are programmed, the illusory parts. And we create illusions for us all the time, like I'm this and I'm that.
As above, so below.
Exactly. So if we're willing to look at it from that point of view, then we can start to find what's truly real. And the reason that we called our venture the Humble Kingdom is because it's actually, you have to become more and more humble with each step of it to actually be able to have a vessel that can even comprehend some of these things and then be able to live that out as well.
Because in humility, there has to be an opening up of the different aspects of who you've decided that you are over the course of your life. Space created around them in order for something new to intercept them, or for you to take that in.
Yeah.
Even in those spaces. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah, absolutely. So the public and private's a big thing. So, but to explain to you why you had this, but wait a minute, why does another human being have the right or ability to take me and myself and put me in something against my will, and they determine, who are they? They're not the creator. They don't have the right to judge me. So what's snapped into reality by itself is morality. And natural law in a lot of ways can be broken down to just morality in and of itself. So when people need a lot of rules in society, they believe we need more surveillance, they believe we need more rules, and people who don't do things should be locked up or whatever. They're actually showing their own lack of morality, because they will externalize that and say we need to be governed, because they can't govern themselves, because they lack basic morality. So the other part of that, though, is that when you're like, but how can that happen? The thing is that that's not happening to Harley the man. That's happening to Harley the name. And as you associate with being a name or a driver or a citizen, which are statutory, and you agree to being that, you place yourself by your own agreement, not as a man under the creator, but under government, meaning mind control, down to the level of statutory entities that the government creates, because you have agreed that you're a name or a resident or a taxpayer or whatever. You answer to the name, I am Harley, I am Tom, You're saying you're a name. So by your agreement, you're the name. The name can be placed in that cell. So if you, by your own acceptance, agree you are a name, you can be placed under a moral guidance in that cell because I am just putting Harley into the cell. But if you're able to make the distinction between the man that answers to the name Harley versus the name, the entity, which is a piece of paper, there's nothing immoral about putting a piece of paper in a cell for a month or telling it what to do or extracting funds from it, from its trust. That's not immoral. What's immoral would be doing that to a man, but if the man agrees that he is that, it's no longer immoral. Now, there's trickery to it, but that's why ignorance is no excuse of the law. But then through that experience, you can be like, oh, wait, what else have I been acting in the capacity of a slave of some sort? You know, like people who just reach for junk food all the time. No one's telling them to do that. No one's forcing them. They're not in a cell. They have ample, like the lunch you made us. Like that's like amazing. But we could have got McDonald's.
I did yesterday.
Yeah, but we didn't today.
Yeah.
So it's just, this is the thing. We have more choices than we think.
Yeah.
So I always bring it, when we talk about offers, it means we have choice. And a lot of the times we have this story that, but I didn't have a choice. I had to. It's like, you didn't have to. You didn't have to accept doing something against your innate, you should know something's wrong, but I'll just do it anyway, because if I don't, whatever the story is, the fact is you just don't have to. I bring this up a lot. If you just ask this one question to who you perceive to be an authority, or even to yourself, like your inner authority or lack thereof, where I'm hungry, so there's no good food, so I'll just eat whatever's in the cupboard. Do I have to? So the answer is no. Like, you can make a story about but then if you say, but then what? But what if you don't? Well, I'll be hungry. Well, then what? Like, so what? Well, then but it does. You still don't have to. You might get hungry. You might have whatever, but it boils down to you don't have to. And then same as somebody asking you to do something against your will. Do I have to? Or do I have to go to work today? No, you don't have to. There are consequences. I think I spoke about this in Alex's podcast. There are consequences, but the fact remains you don't have to. So when you remove don't have to, you're actually free, because otherwise you're bound by the construct of have to. That's an energetic prison that you live in 24/7. You have to. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to whatever.
Because that's very different to a single mother who has the responsibility. Funny, I can't even think of the word responsibility, and I've got a 6-month-old.
Yeah.
But a single mother that's got a child or a couple of children that she's responsible for keeping nourished and keeping housed. She's responsible for keeping them nourished and housed, but she doesn't have to do anything.
Yes.
And that sounds like I'm saying yes, no, but they are subtly different. I mean, they're subtly different to me right now, but I can feel how it gets louder the more that you ponder it.
Well, the more you're in it. So the more you're in it, the denser that is. It's very difficult for people in that to comprehend not, but then you got the forest for the trees, luxury of just being an outsider to it. And you can always pick where there's plenty of room for other opportunities. But when you're in it, you're in a very dense environment. But also you've got to realize you created that for yourself on some way, shape or form, conscious, unconscious, that's being created. So when you're able to sit with that and realize you created it, then you can create something different. And it might not happen tomorrow. You might have to dedicate to things, have discipline and sacrifice, the values I spoke about earlier. But when your morality kicks in, you realize that, all right, well, there is a choice, but then it's really just this choice of morality that's going to lead to a better outcome for whatever the situation is. And I actually like this kind of exercise, because every time I do a workshop or a seminar or something, or talk somewhere, and I give the premise, the universal law, that it's kind of what I became known for, is this expression that everything's an offer. And I love it because you see where people's minds go. Everyone's mind just goes to, but what about this? And I love breaking these thises down, because once you can break it down enough, you realize that even within that, there's still choice, there's still an offer. And then that's where people are able to now expand their mind or their state of being more, to realize there's more possibilities out there than they thought. What they were locked into was a construct of mind. And once you can move beyond these constructs of mind, you can start to really pick where these other constructs came from and how they were developed, why people do what they do in society, why some people work through doors that shut for other people, and so on and so forth. So is there anything though that you wanted to talk about this aspect of natural law and what it really means and how we end up in, is there anything you want to talk about situationally that, how would this work, or how would this apply to this situation, or just anything that we've spoken about so far that you kind of think needs to be expanded on? Because I do know that there's so much more, we go so many different ways with this, but also because you're already quite evolved with how you perceive things, I'm just wondering if there's another avenue you're like, oh, I'm thinking of this now, that through your own experiences that you wanted to...
That I have to do this, I have to do
Not
that.
even that, is anything we've spoken about, anything that we haven't kind of covered, or...
Oh man,
because it's such a broad topic. This is the thing. People, like I said, people usually think natural law means how you handle the laws in society or whatever. Or even it can be broken down to the church, or it can be broken down to some spiritual law or whatever. And it's a lot more than that. It's just, like I said, it's the story of life that weaves its way through the cause and effect laws that happen in this world of duality, and then we have our expression into the world.
Well, where I actually wanted to segue to earlier was the vertical hierarchy of law, and the way that this I don't have to approach makes sense to me is by recognizing that the created or the creation cannot dictate to the creator. So we've got source, God, whatever you want to call it, at the top. And then you've got universal law, and I don't know specifically how it rolls. Natural law, man is created from with duality, like the creation. And then whatever laws we create, the common law or equity or whatever it may be. But we get all the way down to statutory, we get to government, right? Which is comprised of people in positions who have decided that they are now part of the creation. And then you got statutory law, but then the people down here in the government, which are a creation of a creator, us, then say to us, well, you have to do this. But can we say to God, you have to do this? Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. It's a great way to look at it.
Why would we think we know for sure? I can't tell that tree to grow, for example, another aspect of creation. I can't tell God what you've got to do this, whatever. So the same applies for our creation. Yeah?
Yeah, but it happens through trickery and deception, like I said. So you're right, but that's if you're embodying your standing as a man, a living man on the earth, on God's earth. But there's several of them, but just to keep it simple, from this perspective, there's the world, and then there's the mirror image world, and people are tricked into living in the mirror image world. So that's why you can't tell the government, because you're actually below the government. If you were acting in your capacity as a standing, as a man on God's earth, then yes, the government works for you. The government does what you... But that's because if God is ultimate morality and you're an extension of God, you have an inbuilt level of morality that can dictate to a government what to do, because it will be for the betterment of all beings and all life, including the rocks, the trees, the sky. But you look at the skies we have, they're not particularly healthy, right? Because of all the sprays and everything else, or anything in the world. But when you look at a human body and it's riddled with parasites, and you call them your politicians or whatever, and it's riddled with fungus and that, it's like, that's all the things just blowing up big parts of the world and eating it all. It's like, okay, if that's happening in the body, why is that happening in the body? It's because we're not breaking down waste for ourselves. We're not thinking, feeling, eating and hydrating and resting in a way that maintains natural order. So if we step out of natural order, we will have an infection of parasites, fungus, bacteria, protozoans to do that job for us, because we're just not doing it ourselves. So if we then take the responsibility back and say, you know what, I will eat better, think better, feel better, I'll be more kind and loving, I'll rest more, I'll honor myself and my God that made me, well, then all of those come into balance, all of them. And likewise, if you just see that then as an extension into the world, you're like, okay, well, something's out of balance. If we were in more balance properly, then would all of that be in more of balance? So when people, if people are in a state of natural morality, we would be dictating what a government would do, and it would be for the benefit of all. But people, this is what people don't like hearing, because they're like, no, screw the government. How do we overturn it? Or how do we whatever? It's like, you've got to do that for yourself first, because it will just, honestly, I've been, since I was 19, I've been to rallies and protests. I've served notices on this person and that government and this whatever. I've done all the stuff, I've done stuff that I shouldn't mention on a public thing because it's not, but none of it changed. The only time that things actually started to change for the better was when I started to go, okay, where am I out of balance, and what can I actually do to turn that law to work with these laws and make something positive in the world. That's the only time it changed.
And the word that has been sitting in my internal visual lens for the past 5 minutes is listening. Listening seems to be, from what you're saying, such. And the reason I determined that, or I've discerned that, is because listening within everything else, and that's what I love about your process, is that it mirrors reality. It abides by natural law. So if listening outside of this particular construct or this particular system reaps rewards, it's going to be the same thing inside a system like this. And getting to know yourself, getting to know the way that you're functioning, and allowing enough space for that natural inbuilt morality to dominate your experience, as opposed to these ideas and constructs and everything else that likes to step in the way of the natural order of, natural order of things is probably a little bit heavy-handed, but I guess optimal alignment.
Definitely. We'll go through that then, because people might want to hear that. So just to follow on from what I was saying, so if the people don't have the morality there, then the government's going to be still rolling.
Yeah, still rolling.
Cool. If people don't have the morality, it'll be set by the government. So when we're out of balance, then the tables get turned, and we're deceived very easily because we don't have that framework of a very strong morality. And also part of that is a very strong masculine presence in its natural state, which is balanced with feminine, and same vice versa with the feminine. Once those get corrupted, then we lose a lot of the morality, and then we end up in the positions that we're in. So a basic guideline for a hierarchy, which is a good use of a hierarchy, is the creator. The creator is at the top, and the creator creates man. And the creator is meant to create in his image, so to speak. It's written in all the different texts from all different spiritualities and religions. So therefore, man is created as a creator being, and man and woman are the same. But when man then just falls for his own illusion and deceptions, he's like, well, what we could do is we could create a government which will make things a bit easier, and we can get a little bit more like whatever. So then he turns his back on the creator, and now we're severed from that, what would you call it? Like that divine connection's gone. It doesn't mean it's gone for everyone, but I just mean
it's thinned out, not as obvious.
Yeah, and in the dominant hierarchy of things, it's not really there, because it got a mirror image made of it. So just for a quick illustration of that, mirror image of man is person. So men and women living, person, and the plural is persons. Non-living, they're entities. So people, plural of living, persons, plural of entities, non-living. So then you've got money, and money is gold and silver coin, physical, tangible, made by nature, has actual inherent value because it has energetic properties. It can be not only traded for value, but it's used for health purposes. It has a frequency and a resonance made by nature that can be measured and is valuable. But then the mirror image of that is legal tender. That's your dollar bills and stuff, which are debt instruments. They have no inherent value, agreed upon value among society. And if you rub that on your body or try to drink it, you probably get sick, not healthy, as opposed to monatomic gold or silver, which can create health benefits or healing benefits. And so on and so forth down the line between what's real, what's living under God and creation, and then what's been mirror imaged, all of which are non-living. And that's how you end up with laws which are for the living, and then you have your statutes over here. And the laws are pretty much cause no harm and loss. And a lot of people like to get on big platforms and say natural law is just cause no harm and do no loss. It's like, it's true, it's a small percentage of it. It doesn't help you much in life. But then the, your statutory stuff with the 20 something million statutes that there are in Australia and America and whatever, is like, how are you even supposed to know all those? That's a representation of a lack of morality, but that applies to non-living. So then again, when we agree that we're non-living, we're subject to statutes, but when we remember our standing and we have the ability to say no, and we have the ability to just stay resolute and just only, no matter how strong that illusion appears for us to fall into fear and forget who we are and turn our back, we just stay strong under what made us. And when you're willing to do that and able to do that, that's when things change. But until you're willing to have that level of faith and that level of just trust and knowing, people are always just going to fall into, but I have to know it first. I have to learn it from you first, or I have to know the thing to say first before they'll believe or trust or feel. It generally doesn't work like that.
The thing that I'm noticing too is you mentioned that you need to have that level of faith. Well, faith, as I've found it, has come from direct experience, but not only direct experience, listening intently to that direct experience, so that I'm picking up all of the necessary pieces for this understanding to pop up, and for me to recognize what happened, a perception of the cause and effect, for me to then take that on and go, I witnessed it, I experienced it, I now have faith that it exists. But prior to that, faith is like, I think faith and belief are mistaken for each other a lot of times.
They are mistaken, yeah.
So, again, the listening aspect. And what I've been noticing is, and I never, people talk about feeling the spiritual shift in the world and the direction of humanity, and I was never really tuned into that, but more recently there's been this feeling of, more than ever, as bad as things look on the news or out in the world, there's this faith that has been accumulating, and it feels dense, it feels thick, because I've been listening to it, that everything is going to be absolutely fine and perfect. That, does that resonate with you at all? I'm now thinking, I don't even know why I brought it up, but
yeah, for sure. Well, I'll answer it. The answer is yes and no, which I'll explain. Oh,
great! Now I sound like some hippie.
No,
I'm joking.
I know you're joking, but that's what I'm going to bring up, because there's a whole level of that. But so there's also a difference between, so when I said before as well about having trust, belief, faith, knowing, and whatever, it's some of those are contradictory to one another. Knowing and belief are two totally different things. So how can you have both? Mm-hmm. So anyway, I'll just leave that with people. You can have both in context, but it's more, you will have to actually experience, because there's believing is seeing and then seeing is believing. You can invert that any number of ways you want, and it'll wind its way around to finding a position in yourself where what you really have to do is just let go of what is just holding you back. And that's what most of us need to do. A lot of that's just feels like a death or whatever, but at the end of the day, you can...
I think I just heard people punch their screens.
Why?
Because you just got to let go of what's holding you back. I'm fucking trying, man.
Yeah. That's what underpins it all, but obviously there's a lot more to it that helps you get there. But with this whole thing of everything will be all right, I 100% agree with you, and I have that as a knowing. But I have that as a knowing for me and my wife.
Okay.
You as well.
Understood.
There's a lot of people out there who are going to select themselves into like a terrible next 10 or 20 years, financially and economically, which they are different, but let's just put them in the same basket. Health-wise, the way the world looks, oppression, control structures. And then for others, it's just not at all. And it's going to be really, really powerful and healing in many ways. And because I've been, like I said, the last 5 years especially, been to plenty of these empowerment or law or sovereignty, freedom, whatever things, and people just get up there going, yeah, I'm connected to the spirit realm and I've already seen it and we win. And it's like that completely takes out the middle part of actually having to be something that succeeds.
Sure.
It's just going, yeah, okay, well, we succeed. It's just, there's just general feeling everything's going to be okay. And it's like, it is, but you still have to know how to act. You still have to know how to handle the offers of life. You still have to want to be more than you are today. Because just because the frequency of the realm goes through its cycles, which it does, which means it goes up and down.
I think you read my mind. That was what I was thinking. Yeah.
Well, it goes up and down, but the thing is, if you want to stay the same and still spend 8 hours a day on Instagram reading memes on like, oh, we're all one and we're all just going to ascend and it's like, well, you're not because you're spending 8 hours a day on Instagram. It's like, can you? Yes, but it's just a potentiality and it's just an offer. You have to be that. You have to figure out ways to be that, because if you don't and you stay where you are, you don't automatically raise your frequency by not raising your frequency in any way, shape or form, which also means letting things go that were holding you back. So a very simple example of that, like you just said, that's frustrating for people to hear. It's like, how much time are you spending on your phone or your devices or whatever? And for what purpose is that? Is it to keep finding out more ways that you're supposed to die tomorrow? More ways that there's more pedos, but there's white hats that are going to stop the pedos, then they're going to be arrested, but that's linked to this trust. And like, where is that leading you?
Oh, it's so true.
At the end of the day, having some awareness of it is definitely a good thing, because ignorance is no excuse to the law. So just knowing that everything isn't what you're told and how it seems. Yes, the educational system is inverted. The health system's inverted. The child protection agencies are inverted.
Oh, that's a bad one.
Yeah. The media is inverted, the celebrities, and even the ones that are the alternative media celebrities and the people that are supposedly helping people on their, that's, okay, it's all inverted. That's great. How much more about that do you need to know? Really, before you take affirmative action to make yourself a better human being. Because I love those black cockatoos.
They're great. So do I.
They're one of my spirit animals, is the black cockatoo.
Are they?
Yeah, I love them. Because what I would tell people, or suggest, I don't want to tell people, what I suggest to people is that once you know that you're just looking in the mirror, you're looking at inversions, but you don't have to be one. So once you know that it's all fake, most of it's lies, and yes, it's built on corruption and that, once you know that, I would wager a bet that you are better off spending the next 10 minutes meditating, going for a run, creating something, than spending that next 10 minutes finding out who made that corruption, who's going to do the next bad thing, why your water is more poisoned than you already know it's poisoned. Why do you need to know how much it's poisoned, by whom, for how long? Like, where is that taking you? You already know, like, you now have a choice to make. You can make better choices with where you source your water. You can get a filter if you're still going to have tap water. There's a number of things you can do to affirm the positive. Why do you need to keep looking into the negative?
I think it's important for us to recognize too how addictive emotion is. Because when we look at these stories, we dive down these rabbit holes. If you really just, again, listen, that you're accumulating so much energy underneath what you're looking at, because you're attaching to it, you're biting down on it. The thing that we do not need more of is more unconscious, habitual pathways that we become unaware of, or that we sink into the subconscious. And it seems antithetical. No, it seems stupid and unlikely that we would bite down on things that harm us, and we would store things that harm us, and we would actively try to get more of the thing that we do not want. But we do. And it takes, in my experience, it takes a draining of the reservoir of energy in order for that pattern to not be self-sustaining anymore. And what I mean by a draining of the reservoir is just stop doing the thing that you're doing for a little bit. Like I was talking about when I was diving down all of the statutory law, or not even statutory law, common law, equity law. Built so much energy around it that it took about 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month, to decelerate my habitual mental reaction to want to go back to that thing, because it was stimulating. even though I felt like I was going to have a heart attack because of the amount of information and imbalance that was coming in. So yeah, make of that what you will, but I just felt like it was important to mention.
Well, I tell you why it's even there for people to find out. One of the reasons I say this just because it's somewhat true. One of the reasons that I was able to figure out a lot of this pretty quickly and pretty early is because if I put myself in the position of being a controller, I'd be like, of course you do it like that. Yeah, because it just makes sense. And what a lot of people, the reason they get stuck is they just go, I can't believe people would do that. And it's because they wouldn't. And I wouldn't because I have a moral compass, but I understand why somebody would and why it works. Like sales. Like once you learn a bit about sales, you understand why things work, or marketing and advertising, and you try to avoid it as much as possible. And I'm never going to do like that. And I still don't, but it's just, you understand. And then you see when people do it and they succeed, and it's not because they're immoral, it's just because that they understand the human psyche. So you're giving people, well, you're selling them what they want, but you're giving what they need, which is actually a moral thing, if you set it up that way. Of course, there's a way to invert that and make it totally immoral, but that's another story. The point being is that when I could start seeing that, oh, it's all inverted and there's all of this trickery, it's all to make us do this to ourselves. And instead of just thinking it's all totally unfair, I was just like, I get how it works. So as soon as I had that, I just go, okay, well, that's how that works, but this is how I work. Or that's how that works, but this is how I can use that to my advantage.
Would you say that's like an integration of the shadow type of thing?
Exactly the same.
It is the same? Because I think it was who was it that said it? Maybe Jordan Peterson or something said it. But it was like, people can easily imagine themselves as the one who saves Anne Frank, but never as the Nazi. But, so I did this audition maybe, 6-7 years ago or something, and it was for an SS youth soldier.
Mm-hmm.
And I always like to really dig deep into how it was that these people, whoever it was, whether it was Nazis or whoever else, whatever the character, how they ended up in the position they were in. What were the variables in place? Because I had someone say to me, someone like a peer, older actor, say to me, Harley, there's never going to be a character that's too far removed from yourself.
Mm.
Which made me go, oh, so under the right circumstances, I am anybody. And as I dove into the SS youth soldier role, I very quickly realized if Harley, as he is today, the same biological creature, was placed in those times, recognizing the type of effect my own need for my father's approval, the type of effect that had on me, that if I was faced with the Führer, like with God plus dad, essentially this fusion, he'll see you if you do this and that. I mean, I wouldn't now, but I'd more than likely be shooting pregnant women in the back of the head as well. Right? Doesn't mean I would feel good about it afterwards or whatever, and down the track there'd be a ripple effect. But the point is that the sooner that we can accept every aspect and every potentiality of what we are, who we are, to your point, the less that it's like the less that we're going to notice or have to pay attention to the immorality of this person over here. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Because what you were describing was you were essentially describing natural law, and that's the beauty of it, is that people inherently understand what natural law is. They just don't know how to contextualize it with, how it actually works, or how you can write that as a law for yourself. They know how it happens to them, they just don't know how to write it themselves. And when you're talking about the integrating the shadow side, so that's the internal law, L-O-R-E. So the shadow self integrating, being able to do that, that's integrating your darkness with you, because it's always going to be there. You can't extinguish that. That's part of you. Mm-hmm. But when you integrate it, you become a healthy whole meaning holy. This is where all these words come from, man or woman or being in this earth. So then what was I speaking about when you asked if that's the same as integrating the shadow?
Looking at Instagram stuff, looking at all the immoral behavior from everybody else.
Okay, so that you just highlighted how you have the mirror image of one, how that becomes, one's a law or a story, one's a law, cause and effect, but it happens first of all inside us, all of it. So I was talking about integrating the nuts and bolts, and it comes from that. And the reason that a lot of people will fall into one of those traps of, needing to find the enemy is because it becomes so tempting to find the thing to blame for the situation that I'm in.
Oh, that's exactly what it is.
It's the fluoride. It's these mother effers that do the poisoning. So now I have someone to blame for the situation that I'm in. And that's why it's so addictive. That's the drama thing you were talking about. It's like, we need to find it because we need to know it's not my fault.
So this moves into insourcing, outsourcing. I don't think we fully broke that down. We may have. Maybe the whole thing we've been discussing is insourcing and outsourcing, but
in a way,
I'll forget it then. Another thing that has sprung up that because I wrote a whole list of questions, I sort of went down all these potential, avenues for lines of inquiry, and one of them that stayed in the abandonment of everything that I'd written down was this orientation scale that you have presented. I heard it on the Way Forward podcast, and you described it as creator, man, wife, or husband or wife, children, work, and service. So I'd like to dive into that more, but firstly, the immediate next question that arose when I was writing this down was, I've always ideally seen my work and service as one, but do you see them ideally as separate?
No, they can be the same. Yeah. So I'll tell you how so again, I find that there is a value in let's say a chart or a hierarchy, to the point that you become the hierarchy, you transcend it, and so on and so forth. So
no longer mental property.
Yeah, exactly. So we, especially in the world that the timeline that we've come in on, that's completely separated from morality and everything else, we're brought up by parents who did their best, but aren't exactly the epitome of like people that can lead you through a rite of passage. Well, at least I wasn't. A lot of people I know weren't. Then you're educated by the Prussian education system through school.
Yep.
You believe what's on the television. Like, you've got television, you've got pop stars, movie stars, the most immoral kind of stories that are imprinted in us from a young age, like ways of being, and being overly promiscuous, and then too much stuff to name. Doesn't really matter. The point is that we come through in a state that would benefit from having a hierarchy of needs or morals or way of living. Similar to what straightened me out when I was younger was getting into a traditional martial art that had discipline and structure and a belt ranking system. Because the belt ranking system doesn't really mean you're a great anything. Mm-hmm. It just means that you're sticking to principles and you're progressing up or down a hierarchy of being a better man.
I was set to be a black belt by the time I was 9, by the way. What am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
To your point.
Yeah. But it can help it can help instill discipline and honor and respect and higher values, which I really like. So anyway, this isn't my hierarchy. This is just something that's a generic way that has worked for a lot of people that would distill down, which is if the creator creates everything, the creator has the highest service. So all glory to God. Like, if I do something great, don't give me, like, it's not like give me all of it's my thing. It's like, well, hopefully what I did was I humbled myself to a degree that God could work through me to a degree that touched somebody else, right? So then the next priority in life under the creator is yourself, which sounds super selfish, like, hey, it's all about me, I'll just have a me day and whatever. But there's truth in that too, because there's only as much service you can be to others as you can be to yourself, to the point where people can start martyring themselves because they have their hierarchy flipped. They don't have self-worth. So what they're doing by being a good person and being very helpful to everybody is they have an inverted hierarchy, and it's due to an inherent lack of self-esteem or self-worth, which is an inherently negative thing to have and dishonors the creator. And
which at times creates disease.
It will absolutely create
like
disease.
ALS, did you ever hear that one?
Yeah.
Gabor Mate, the body says no. He's like, the doctors determined whether somebody had ALS by whether or not they were a nice enough person, because they were trying to be something for somebody else whilst internally sabotaging, because I'm not worth anything, I need to do something for you.
Absolutely.
Sorry, continue.
No, that's perfect. So that's the negative, that's the shadow aspect of it, which unless that's integrated is going to cause harm. It seems nice. That's also where part of the meaning of the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It's part of that meaning too. So once you serve the creator and then you serve yourself, the next level of service is to your husband or wife or your partner, whatever stage of life you're in. Some people aren't at that stage of life, so it can apply to something different but equal in that respect. And after that, it's your children. And like I've spoken about a lot of times, I've done a lot of work with men, and they have this, they are losing their vital life force and feeling less like a man, and their masculinity is present in society. And one of the reasons is they spend all their time dedicating to their work because they're trying to feed their kids. So therefore their relationship with the wife is suffering. Unbeknownst, the wife can explain it perfectly well, but the man doesn't, because he thinks he's dedicating to the family by dedicating to the kids first and putting work first. So the way we speak about this is that if you dedicate yourself to your wife before any of those things, the rest falls into order, because they fall into a natural order. So then after that, it's your children before work, because you look after them, you're nurturing them and feeding them with the right things. Before you provide physical food, you're providing them with the non-physical sustenance that really makes or breaks a child and their experience in the world. And after that, it's your work. And after that, it's you could call it ministry or service or gift or whatever you want to call it. So when you're just coming in to look, I've really got to figure things out because I'm feeling like I'm oppressed by the world. I don't feel like I've got my ducks in a row. I feel like I'm pushing things uphill or whatever. That can really help. But it would get to a point where, especially like you mentioned, that maybe those last two, service and work, can roll into one. And then work and the children can it can all start rolling into one act of grand service to life. But because your natural order inside of you is in order, those other things don't need the hierarchy laid out on paper anymore or in the mind, because they live through your vessel. So then once you do that, now you're starting to work in the world of alchemy. So we talk about natural laws insofar as, 1 + 1 = 2, but eventually 1 + 1 could equal 75, depending on lead and charcoal or whatever, and you got gold. It's like, well, how do you get gold out of that? Well, that's alchemy. It's more than the sum of its parts, but you work your way to that by learning how 1 and 1 = 2. That's where we're at with what we're sharing at the moment, is just that side of it, but at least letting people know that you're never bound to that. Like, you got to honor it until the time that you can embody that fully. And that can take however long for all of us, different for all of us. But just knowing that, because what I do see people do, because I came through that world of holistic health, is people form an identity or a religion or whatever around their diet or their way of doing exercise or whatever, and that rules them for their whole life, even if they're technically right. Like, butter is better than margarine, and this much carbs is better than that much. It's like, technically that's right in isolation, but then again, that's reductionism. But as soon as you live under that, like, that's the end, that's the be all and end all. You're now a slave to that. Your standing is actually below a piece of bread or below a banana. Imagine having a standing in life underneath a banana. It goes like God, trees, bananas, you're below a banana.
And so where can people find the courses that you're providing? Are they ready to go online?
Yeah, we've got our beginner's guide to natural law. That's at thehumblekingdom.com. And it's just the start, because from everything that I did from 2020 till 2024, late 2024, it was all a little bit of trying to put a Band-Aid on a wound, because people realize they had the need to know, but they don't really know what they need to know. They're asking questions. They don't really know what they're asking. So it was always just trying to provide something that'll help, but me knowing full well it's not really the answer that they need. So now being able to provide a framework of, these are just like, forget what's happening in the world, just you in your own world. These are some of the basic laws that can help you to at least balance out those internal structures first and foremost. And as a result of doing that, you'll be able to deal with the world of commerce and quote unquote authorities and whatever, like much more effectively. And from that, I've got about 20 years of work now to do with that, because it obviously goes into more advanced learnings from whatever, like as extensions of that. And yeah, but this beginner's guide is, I think, where it starts.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what you produce. And if you're still here listening to this podcast, I would imagine it'd be pretty clear that this type of work and these frameworks and this way of operating is one of the most important educations that we could give ourselves at this particular time. And that's just my personal opinion, but I really appreciate you. Thank you for coming, and thank you for your service to humanity.
Thanks, Harley. Appreciate what you're doing today.